Great. Well, good morning. Welcome everybody to the Existential Toolkit for Climate Justice Educators discussion group. I'm Jennifer Atkinson. I'm joining you from Seattle, which sits on the traditional land of the Duwamish people. And today we're going to be exploring the Existential Toolkit website, which just launched. As some of you know, it was just about a year ago, right? I guess next month, that we all came together as a group for the first time for our inaugural conference. And out of that, this website has grown. Folks have been contributing to it over the course of the year, and you're going to be hearing from the team that's really taken the lead in organizing it. So it's my pleasure to introduce both of them. One, our facilitator for today is Dr. Ellen Kelsey, who's a scholar and educator in the area of evidence-based hope. Ellen's, she's worked on developing hopeful and solution-focused programs for a lot of large organizations like the Monterey Bay Aquarium. She's been a fellow at the Rockefeller Foundation and the Rachel Carson Center in Munich. And she's currently, I believe this is still true, Ellen, you're still at University of Victoria, School for Environmental Studies. Great. And I think some of you also probably know her from her most recent book, which she talked about last fall, Hope Matters, which was from 2020. And actually, could you drop a link for that, or Sarah or anybody, if you want to drop a link to that book in the chat, that would be great. If any of you are not familiar with it, it's a must read. I am actually teaching it in my course right now on climate grief, and my students have just found it as a transformative resource. So Ellen's also a best-selling children's book author, and if you didn't know any of that, but you have been coming to these talks, you will definitely remember her from the last time she led one of our sessions back in the fall, which happened to fall on November 4th. It was that November 4th, the morning after the presidential election in the US, when some of us were curled up in the fetal position that morning waiting for election results. And Ellen really courageously led us through a session, which was really a joy that particular morning, and could not have been more timely. So she's back today to catch us up on this new toolkit. And she's also joined by Robin Hutchings, a graduate student at Royal Roads University in Victoria, BC. And Robin has organized the resources and helped design and set up this website over the past 9 months or so. So we're really grateful for her work. She knows the site inside and out, and is going to be a great resource for all of us in learning about what's there. So with that, I'll hand it over to the two of you.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. You are the best introducer. I really, really appreciate your kind words. And it's been so much fun to work on this existential toolkit with you and everyone else. So I'm really, really pleased to be here today. And what Robin and I are hoping to do is just to share a little bit of the background in kind of our thinking that went into Jennifer and Sarah and I when we were originally thinking through what the gathering would be that Jennifer was just referring to. And then during our gathering, during our conference and the workshops that fell from that, the panels and things, we were really aware of this group as a collective, that we are a collective of people who are in many ways, I think, or I tend to think of it as defining an emerging field. We come from lots of different backgrounds. We have lots of different scholarly and practical sort of interests. And yet there's something about this that calls us. When Jennifer and Sarah did their very first, introduction to this idea of getting together, I think it's fair to say we were all quite overwhelmed by how much interest there was in this area. And so that to me is a really pregnant time when there's a lot of people who see themselves in something, but that thing itself is not yet well defined. That's a very creative period, and it's such an important networking time. So it's been wonderful, that Jennifer has continued on hosting these kinds of sessions so that we can learn in more depth what are the kinds of ideas that are influencing, the work we're all doing. And we bring it to each other so that we start to better understand the connections that we have and the kinds of overlaps that we have, or the points of departure, and where we have different sort of tendrils coming out of this. So in putting together the toolkit, that was really our intention, was to say, okay, here are all these wonderful resources that each of you and others have contributed. How do we put them together in a way that is reflective of this emergent field? And that's why I asked Robin Hutchings to really take the lead on this, because Robin was interested in this from a research standpoint. You know, I said to her, here's an emerging field. What does it really look like? Because when we categorize things and try to put them together, it causes us to see, you know, where do we have the most resources? Where are we kind of thin on resources that you might have expected to see, but in fact, we didn't have coming in? You know, these kinds of gaps or overlays tell us about where we're oriented. And so Robin very generously, I should say, you might not realize this, but she has read every resource that is on this website. That is a huge amount of work. And I did not know, you know, as so often is the case when I invited her to do this, how much work I was actually inviting her to do. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have been so brave in asking her, but she has done that. And so now what Robin will do is not only has she put together a beautiful website, and we'll talk you through that and try to illuminate some of what I was just talking about, but also she will go on to really look at this as the grounds of her research project for her master's. So it's wonderful to be able to work in that way. And Robin has just been great to do that. So when I first saw Robin and said, Robin, here's a project I think is just made for you, I said, you know, we have sort of like, it's almost like a shoebox of resources people have put in. We did them all through, you might remember, through a Google Doc, just a common Google Doc, and you all, you know, sort of put your things in there. And then what Robin did was started to tease them out, put them into other kinds of boxes, and to try to think of what kinds of categories they could best fit into. Now, one of the things immediately that we noticed, and that will be no surprise to any of you, is the vast intersectionality of our work, right? The kinds of ideas that we're all engaged in are so deeply interconnected, and in a systemic way, that capacity to try to pull them out to make them more easily searchable, and yet show an integration so that we're not positioning this as kind of lumps of material. I think that has been an ongoing challenge for us, and a challenge, I think, for any good website design that's dealing with kind of intersectional issues. So I'm going to stop for a moment and maybe ask Robin if she would be kind enough just to sort of show us the website and just start us into sort of your process of how you put together what we're now seeing.
For sure. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, and just warning to everyone, I am a little bit nervous about this. I've been working on this for quite a while. It's a evolving process. It's still there's still resources that need to go up that are organized, but just haven't made it on the website yet. So if you know you've contributed a resource and it's not up yet, it's in its spot and it's in its queue to get onto the website. But yeah, just bear with me. I'm a little nervous.
I was telling Robin beforehand, if you couldn't say you're nervous to this group, who could you say it to? You know, we're all here absolutely interested in emotions and how we feel. So we're glad you're here, Robin.
Thank you. So this is the home page. Can everyone see this okay?
Yep.
Yep. All right. So yeah, when you go onto the website, which some of you guys might have seen it already, it is live. There's a home page and just a little bit of a descriptor of what the site is about, and the fact that this is like a living document, that it is going to grow over time as more resources are generously donated. And then there's a little bit of a how to use the website. And the way that I decided to organize this, as I was going through and reading all the incredible tools that were contributed, I watched for these emerging themes. And there were sort of three main themes that I saw that I could sort of plunk things into, and that was this reflection, the resiliency, and justice. So when you go into these, under reflection, there are then these sub-themes. So there's self-care, there's mindfulness, there's the emotion focused, there's the narrative, there's more than human world. So there's the various sub-themes under each. And then the resiliency, we've got resources on hope, imagining new futures, pedagogy, and creativity. So these are all, each one of these sub-themes, there's resources they could go into, more than one spot, but you kind of got to organize them in some way so that people can easily search them. So that was sort of the goal. For justice resources, as I was going through the big Dropbox of resources, this was the area that I noticed when we started, we were actually kind of lacking resources that were really focused on some of these bigger justice topics like decolonization and reconciliation. There's racism, privilege, and anti-racism. There's an intersectionality section. And we did a call out in December for more resources on these particular topics. And we just got a flood of resources, which is amazing. And I am still going through those resources right now. So that's why this section is a little bit smaller right now, but it is one that will grow. But yeah, it was really interesting going through the resources initially because it was really clear that there's a really strong focus on the emotion side of teaching about climate and climate education. So those resources, we've got many of them, and they're fantastic. So that's just generally like the themes that are that I teased out. And then I also organize based on resource type. So if you're looking for, you're an educator and you're just like, I need some activities or I need a podcast, that sort of thing, there is this resource type area that you can search as well. There's actually more sections to be added to this. I've got lectures still to be added. There's academic articles still to be added. But basically you can go to these activities and you'll see the various activities. Each one I tried to give the title of what the resource is and then just a little bit of a descriptor, and then either who contributed it or who it's by. One of the interesting things was it wasn't always clear who had contributed the resource, just because they were all sort of plunked into Dropbox. And sometimes I could tell, sometimes I couldn't. So if you donated a resource and you contributed, you know who you have and you want credit for that, email us at the Existential Toolkit at gmail.com and let us know and we can plug that in. But yeah, there is the resource type way to search for things. So we've got journalism and popular articles. These ones, there were lists and lists and lists of articles that were donated. And so they're not all up yet, but they are, it is growing. It is getting up there. And then media and podcasts. You can see some really good podcasts that were donated. In some cases, there is lists of podcasts donated. So Maria Martelli donated a whole 2-page list of various podcasts that are related to climate change and other related subjects. That was really great. And then syllabuses. And in some cases, syllabuses were donated, as well as the classroom activities that go with them. So those are plugged in with the syllabus so that they'd be easily found as one little package. And you can see here with the climate change, art and culture with Professor Jill Gatlin. And yeah, and then we've got an about section. So there's, at this point, it's just a couple blurbs that Ellen and I did introducing things and about the toolkit. But we're going to have a section that is more of a contributors list that actually lists the contributors and a bit of some bios about the contributors, which I believe Jennifer is working on putting together. And then at this point right now, there is also the contributors I listed here for those of you who had done the YouTube videos, the short ones, way back a year ago. So there's a link to that. It gives an introduction to the various topics that people are focusing on and are contributing.
Robin, I'll just jump in and add some things as you're showing us that. I did want to mention that the site has a lot of beautiful photographs in it. And those photographs were all sourced for us by a wonderful high school student named Jayanti Jha, who very kindly volunteered to search through images that were, copyright free that we could use in this way. And so that too was a fascinating part of this project, to see how she interpreted the kinds of ideas that Robin was sharing with her and I was sharing with her in a visual way. And so that was great that she came forward to Jennifer, I think it was, right, Jen? And then Jennifer kindly invited her to work with us. So we have a lot of gratitude to her for her hard work in that way. As you can see, the way Robin has the contributor part that Jennifer is now kindly working on, and with the speaker series that is easy for us to see as well. Our intention there is to make it easy for people to find out who you are as a network of people, so that they can then come to you more directly around the ideas that you are the experts in. So it's not only a resource thing, it's also a networking opportunity, and that's our intention there. One of the other things that Jennifer or Robin and I spent time, oh, sorry, Robin, did you want to say something about where you are?
No, I was just showing the discussion series page.
Yeah.
But I can also, when you're talking about the contributors, so I'm working on one section. Let's jump in here for a second.
Yeah, please go ahead.
That's going to go into the About section, which will basically request if anyone wants to do any more or wants to donate a resource, add a resource to the toolkit, so that we are able to get the information that we sort of need in order to recognize you as a contributor. There is going to be a form, which I'm just working on right now. That's what this is here, that will just ask you to put your name and credentials, a 1 or 2 sentence bio about yourself, and if you have a link to a web page. If you want that contact information on the Existential Toolkit website, let us know, because then that will go into this About section here about the contributors. And then with your resource or tool that you donate, just a little short sentence about what the resource is, 1 to 3 sentences long, so that we can plug that into the website. And then based on what is in the website here, the various themes, where you think your resource would fit and in the website. So that this form here is going to be something that we ask you to fill out and email to us with the resource that you want to add. So that'll be plugged into the website here as well.
Thanks, Robin. That's great. Yeah, and that will be so helpful for you to say where you think it fits and a few lines of descriptor, because that really was a large part of Robin's work, was trying to essentially be an archaeologist, find her way through what you had contributed and try to make sense of it. So asking you directly will be really a good shortcut for all of that, and more and better for putting it in your own words. The other thing that Robin and I talked a lot about is who is this for? Is it for each of us? In a way it is. We are climate justice educators. And so we were trying to make something that was for us, for other educators, and through them for the people we seek to reach. But we were we decided to really put the emphasis on the educators, our collective role in that, rather than making it directly for students, for example. So we made choices around how we organize things in that way. Robin, did you want to add anything to that point?
I think you got it, Ellen.
Okay, yeah, no worries. Okay. And I did want to just add a little bit more to what Robin was saying about the emotions focus versus the justice focus. And that was, I think there are always these moments when you, like something really reveals itself. So in our original contribution list, almost all the resources really were in that emotion realm, ways of creating safe spaces, ways of introducing these ideas, routes into dealing with them, and around resiliency. All of that was strong and really good. And then we started wondering, if we're climate justice educators, which is really the title and the purpose of our work together, we're missing the justice piece, and why might that be? And it led us to kind of query, is it that we're not working in that area, or that somehow in our original call we didn't ask for it in such a way that that came forward? We were really kind of curious about this, what appeared to be a big gap, especially given our titling. We've used climate justice throughout everything that we've done, from our conference to our workshops to our to this. And so then Sarah and Jennifer and we did another call out to the group. And as Robin said, those resources were completely there. In fact, many of them came in. We were inundated. And so again, I think this is such a fascinating, for me anyway, fascinating as an emerging field, how it might not have been what we first intuitively thought to contribute, but it is where we are working. And so anyway, now those resources are plentiful and as Robin said, are being added. So that is quite revealing, and something I think that led us to then think about our own network and how we should be more actively increasing the diversity of our network and thinking in those kinds of ways. So by seeing an absence, which was in fact not a true absence, the work was there, we just hadn't somehow gathered it. It did lead us to a lot more deep thinking about diversification and how we do that perhaps more actively. And so that's something I'd just like to bring forward as a discussion, perhaps emerging from this work. The other thing I'd really like to ask of you is, we in our look at different websites that are doing similar kinds of amalgamating of multiple resources from many different people, we find that the strongest ones are curated. That the materials, it's clear somebody has looked at them, put them into a way that is very easy for me to access and make sense of. And I can then trust the materials. And so we realized that, just having Robin and I look at materials is not enough of a way to curate this. It's unsustainable. We really need to do this in a more collective fashion. And so what we'd like to propose is that two of you, if you were willing, would volunteer to help curate resources as they come in. And we don't know, it may only be a couple, or it could be many. We don't know, because we've got the big bulk of them in now, but for the next 6 months. And Robin has kindly offered to stay on the project to work with those two people. And our idea is kind of like, how things pass on. Robin will stay and work with those two people, and then one of those people might kindly stay on to work with the next two people who come in. And that way we'll be able to sort of pass along our knowledge about what this curatorial role really is, the kinds of questions that come up, how we've handled them. We'll keep that institutional history that's starting to develop through that work. So I don't know if two of you would be willing to do that right now. Into the chat, that would be great, or put up your hand. We would really welcome it. Or if you wanted to email us at the Existential Toolkit, if you need a moment to think about it. But I think it's a really great way for us also to all over time collectively understand the breadth of resources that are in this toolkit and how each of us is looking at this. So I think it's a really great opportunity from a networking perspective, and it's in keeping with our co-created intentions. That's how we've thought about this all the way along, is that this is a co-created venture. So if people are willing to do that, that would be wonderful. And then I'm going to stop and just see if there are questions or comments, or Robin, did I forget anything that we wanted to touch on?
No, I think you got it all, Ellen.
Okay, that's great. And again, I just like to do a huge shout out to Robin for monumental. How many hundreds of resources did you end up reading and watching? And
There's over 200. They're not all on the site yet. They're in organized folders that need to be added up to the website. But yeah, there's over 200. So
and some of those resources are full curriculum with all the materials in them. So
yeah, some of them, when a resource is
lot.
donated, sometimes within one resource there is about 50 different things to go through and read or look at, which is incredible. I mean, you guys are just a wealth of knowledge and have so much to contribute. It's really awesome.
And
yeah.
I see that Andrea has already volunteered to help, which is wonderful. So we just need one more person. Thank you. Thank you, Andrea.
Irina has volunteered too.
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you, Irina. Well, that's wonderful. Okay. And I also need my duck pen fence fixed. So if anyone wants to volunteer for that, no.
I'll help, Ellen. I'm down the
Thank
road.
you. Okay. All right. So we've been talking a lot. I just love to turn it over if people have comments or questions or anything you'd like to add or things you noticed, please go
I
ahead.
have a million questions, but the first is the easiest, it's the lowest hanging fruit, which is, did you have to eliminate anything because it was irrelevant or pare anything down? Did you ever make choices about not including anything? I'm just so curious.
There were, you know what, there's only about 3 things that, and I checked with Jennifer and Ellen about whether it was really appropriate to include it. And there was only about, I can't think it's 3 things that I didn't include. But everything else was, you know, really on point. And some of it is the hardest thing, honestly, is putting some of these things into these little boxes of themes, right? Because they really could be in so, and you'll see some of them are in a couple spots because I really just couldn't say like, this is only this thing, right? But honestly, to make it searchable and to make it accessible, which really is the main goal, you know, things had to sort of be teased out. But yeah, just there's only about 3 things that I didn't include that just were not quite on what we were looking for.
And my second question is, if you were looking at this as like an archive or as an artifact of a watershed transition moment in pedagogy or education, what would you say educators are being asked to do and become and be?
You know, just from all the resources that are here, I would say that there is such a call out and a need and an acknowledgement for acknowledging the fact that when students go into the classroom, they're not just bringing their minds, they're bringing their hearts. And that there, with this topic, there is such a responsibility and a need for acknowledging that this topic impacts people on a very much on a personal level, but then also how that relates to yourself and the rest of the world. And so that, you know, the fact that this is grounded in an emotion focused positionality is I think really good. And that's what really emerged out of this, is that there is just such a need for in our classrooms to make space for that. And also to make space for in the topic of climate change, for the fact that climate change isn't just about the planet. It is so much about the people and our communities and society, and that there is these intersectional issues that are so overlapping, right? So, you know, we have to look at how climate change is affecting various other aspects, whether it be gender or migration or our economy. And so, you know, these things really came out. But honestly, the biggest call out, I think, is just that emotional acknowledgement that students are coming in pretty unaware, pretty raw, and that this can really impact them. And there is a responsibility for us as educators to acknowledge that and take care of that to some degree.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Robin. Did anyone else have a question or comment?
I have a quick question, and this is just building off of a few queries that showed up in the chat.
Oh, thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah, So Irina, actually don't want to entirely put Irina on the spot because Irina said I'd be interested, but can you define again what it means to curate the incoming work? So what would the responsibility be for those folks? And then I have a second follow-up question, which is about the website itself, but I can wait until maybe we think through that a little bit. If you have an idea that you could share.
Maybe I'll start, and Robin, just add if I haven't got this right. But as I see it, you would be on the email recipient list for the Existential Toolkit email, and so anyone who's submitting a resource in that kind of what am I trying to say? The document that Robin is currently developing that has all the, this is the resource, here's what it is, here's what it does. You would actually receive that. So the panel, the committee of 3 would receive it. And then you would decide amongst the 3 of you how you handle that. Maybe one person leads it for a week and then the next person, you can decide as a group of 3 what your workload's like and how you want to do that. But it would mean that you would read the resource and you would say, oh, I think this really fits beautifully within resiliency, and let's get it up there. And then you would just post it up there. So it's pretty minimal. It just means reading it through to make sure that we know where it best fits, and that all the materials that we need are there. Is that how you see it, Robin?
Yeah, and it might get a little bit easier too, because we are asking people when they are contributing a resource to sort of look through the website and see where do you think it fits. So there'll be sort of a suggestion from the person, which will make things a little bit smoother, I think. And also if people put that little descriptor too, then it is just a little less time consuming putting it up on the website, because that will already be there.
And it might mean a quick email back to the person who submitted it just to clarify 1 or 2 things, that sort of thing. So really small, quite minimal. We thought 3 is more than enough people to do it, but we thought it's helpful to have 3 just in case something comes up where we want to have a conversation about, does this fit? How does it fit? That sort of thing. It's nicer to have a few people to talk to. Yeah. And Jen, you had another question?
Yeah, so the follow-up question was thinking about Robin then moving on after those that 6 months overlap, then how we might actually do the website management itself, how the posts are made, the links are added, et cetera. Do we want to bring on sort of a rotating team of students? I mean, I'm just imagining here that for any students that are doing research in this area, what an incredible opportunity to sort of be on the front lines of seeing these resources coming in. There could be a lot of interest there and opportunity. But yeah, I'm kind of just interested in the sort of the logistics.
I really like that idea. And one of the things we had hoped for, but we were just so overwhelmed by the amount of material, was to have more of a student voice, really, a younger voice coming forward.
We did talk about that, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. No, it's okay. We had a lot of ambitions, and I mean, Robin is not old, like it's great that way. And having Jayanti as part of the team was really important to that. But I love that idea, Jennifer. And I think now that the structure is there, then I think that would be quite doable, and would it would immerse students, and it would help us to see new categories that I keep thinking of Ben's wonderful talk about youth. And, what stayed with me really was this idea of, we're not talking about sustainability, we're talking about transformation, that the kinds of categories that emerge would come from a different perspective. And I think that will help to enrich our site even further. So I love that idea.
Mm-hmm. Linda, just to your question, I can answer that real quickly. It's Squarespace, so it's very user friendly.
Yeah, and Robin figured out how to get videos on it, which was the only user friendly part. So now we can do that.
It's because of the version of Squarespace that we're using, but yeah, simple enough once you figure it out.
Any other comments or questions?
It looks like there's quite a few in the chat actually about adding resources other than in English. So we have Claude and Terry and a few others kind of asking about that.
I think that would be wonderful. And certainly I know from the work I did with Ocean Optimism, we just then moved into multilingual, we just present things in whatever language people put them forward. So I think that's wonderful. If we have more diversity of languages present, that would be great. So please, yes. I guess the answer is yes, without looking at the question. But maybe one thing just to ask of you is, obviously the success of this is how widely we can disseminate it. You know, we would love for people to use it. So if you could do some thinking about who you would most want to share it with, and thinking it's another way of us growing our network, you know, so who you want to share it with so the resources are used, but also who you want to share it with so that we are reaching people that we're not currently reaching. So in that sense of a diversification opportunity, I really see this as that. So if you could each do that, it will just make it better.
Yeah. Ellen, looks like there's a couple other questions coming in as well. Andrew's asking, is there a budget? Where did the funds for Squarespace and the domain come from? We might also want to think about what that looks like forward, not just where the funds were from the past.
Yeah, so we were able to get a small grant from the Rachel Carson Center. They were really great about, you know, we had originally intended to have a face-to-face conference with a small group of people, and then we instead were able to do a large conference virtually when COVID first hit, which I think Jennifer, Sarah, and I all feel that was a good thing. You know, it was great to have a much bigger gathering. So we were able to go back to the Rachel Carson Center and say, we do need some funds both to pay for Squarespace and to, you know, compensate Robin a small amount for her hard work. So now we are, Jennifer and I have been talking about ways of continuing to gather funding for it, because yes, it will require funding, whether that's some way of compensating students who are curating it, in addition to the Squarespace, you know, just renting the space. But that's how we've done it thus far. Someone is asking about, could the website have a search function added? Magdalena, could you just come on verbally and just explain more what you're looking for there? Just unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hi.
I was just thinking of the colleagues that I would like to recommend this for, and imagining someone who wants to find something very specific, you know, just by a keyword. But I guess that would require coding the entries with keywords. I know nothing about web design, or maybe just like searching for a specific word anywhere in a given entry. It just seems like that would be, or even for a name.
That's that it would be a really cool tool to
Sorry.
have on the website. It would be really awesome to have. I myself don't know how to do that in terms of coding and adding such a thing. It's something that if anyone has any knowledge on in terms of using Squarespace and doing that, that would be a really neat thing to discuss and figure out how to do for sure. But yeah.
Yeah, so in the context of the search function, I have been building with a group of friends a similar website, but focused on children's literature, Climate Lit. And we've been working on it for maybe 7 months now. And at the heart of that website is the database, searchable database of books that you can look for them through age groups, lexile level, keywords, themes, all of those. So multiple levels of searching. And we initially started with Squarespace. And then I talked to a couple of developers and they told me that Squarespace has very limited search engines. And eventually we went with a designer company, a web design company, and when we told them what is it that we want to do, they said, yes, we can create this website for you, but it'll cost you about 40 grand. So we said, yes, thank you. We appreciate it. And then the robust engine would enable us to have multiple levels of search, that it would pull up lists of books and it will overlook, for example, misspellings. It'll look for, if you miss a word in the title, it will still pull it up, so very robust thing. But we cannot afford it at this point. So we went with WordPress. And WordPress has a couple of search engines, and then they're subscription based. The most expensive one is, I think, about $80 a month. So, I mean, it requires a budget. So we're building this at this point, and so the structure is under construction, but we sort of abandoned Squarespace because of the limitations of search. So the more materials we have, the more difficult it would be to search through all of this content using keywords. So that's my experience, but we haven't launched the site yet. We're still working on it. But we also started with Squarespace, and the idea was that Squarespace works wonderfully across different platforms. So cell phone, tablet, laptop, desktop, all kinds of things. So it's, but I'm super excited about what you're doing. And this is, this whole architecture of how to package this content, so that it's easily accessible. This is a major challenge. I'm super impressed by what you've done.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I suppose on the other side of searching, one of the things we were talking about too is because we can't do keyword searches, it also causes people to look through more of the materials, to sort of see what's in there, and that can be a strength too. So so much around it. Thank you, Marek, for your experience. And thank you to everyone. I'm just catching up. I apologize, my duck suddenly flew into the area where I am and attacked my dog. That's why I jumped out. But anyway, all calm here now. Those of you who have been volunteering to look at resources in other languages other than English language, I really appreciate that. So we'll make sure that we archive the chat so we can follow up with people. It's great.
So Sarah, you mentioned that it would, just in the chat here, that it'd be good to have a space on the website where you can add your resource by emailing existentialtoolkit.com. So that is going on the website in the About section with that document. So that'll go up in the next couple of days here.
Fantastic. I'll hold off on sending this out until that's there, because I think people will want to go to that, not have it. The moment will be passed. So
for sure.
Thanks.
It's great. Oh, and there was a good question. They're all good questions. Sorry, there was a question I know has been on a lot of people's minds. Brooke was raising around the size of the discussion group and whether we wish to increase that or, that sort of thing. Jennifer, did you want to touch on that at all? I know that's something you've been thinking a lot about.
It really remains an open question. I think right now, technically, the group is open to anyone, but we haven't sort of advertised broadly or in any we basically on the website, which lists the schedule for the discussion series. There's a note there to say, if you'd like to be added to the email list, email Jennifer Atkinson. And so that's basically how it's happened, is that folks who actually come to these meetings will reach out to colleagues who they think that would be deeply interested and would be a good fit. And then if those folks are interested, then they'll reach out. I feel in a way that's actually worked fairly well because it's sort of based on the actual knowledge within this group of who we are and who might be a good fit and a useful contributor, as opposed to the sort of misreading that can happen when, oh, it's a discussion group about climate change. So, and then there's kind of a free for all. And we really do want to stay true to the core of this being educators, or at least, education focused. And then also actually focusing on existential, mental health, emotional dimensions, affect theory, et cetera. But, none of that is really written in stone. That's just the way it's sort of developed organically. And we could think about that in different ways. All of you, of course, are always invited to reach out to colleagues who you think might be interested. And we've certainly never turned anyone away. But this really has been just grown out of a personal network, and it's been very word of mouth. and I don't know, Ellen, Sarah, or any of the rest of you are on the call. I mean, this group is as much yours as it is anyone's. So we certainly want to, kind of think through this, and who are we? Who else would we want to be part of this conversation? Where are we going in the year ahead, and what do we want that to look like?
Yeah, I'd love to hear other people here's thoughts on all of that.
Well, I think it's actually working quite well. As Jennifer said, a relatively small group, we can have conversations. I guess as things evolve, there's the idea of maybe breakout groups or whatever, but I would keep it going the way it is for a while anyway, because it's working well.
And if people don't have comments on that particular question about, so the questions I think that are on the table are, is there a desire and energy to continue as it is? Cloud just said that as it is has been working well. So should we keep going next semester? And if so, do we have people who we would like to volunteer to lead the discussions on stuff that they're thinking about or works in progress or just topics of their passion, or people who we would like to invite to do so, who may not necessarily be part of this group, but whom we like to hear from or whatever. So can we start to, like we did at the end of last fall, there was energy to keep going, so we kept going, and then we pulled together an itinerary of the semester's speakers and what would happen. And so we're at that point now, I think, if I understand it correctly, Jen and Ellen.
Yeah, and I think it kind of makes sense to take a bit of a pause over the summer as folks are using their summers for what summers are intended, but to certainly start back up in the fall. And we already had emails from a few folks letting us know that they'd be interested in facilitating a session, and also mentioning others that they thought would be a good fit for doing that as well. So if you wanted to nominate somebody, particularly if you could maybe check with them first and CC them on it, but that's a great way. And just to directly email Sarah and myself that's just the way or the process to go for it. And Andrea is asking if we have the energy to keep these talks going, maintaining the calendar, the Zoom links, if we want somebody else to take the lead. I think that would be a great practice. I think that, whoever is organizing it, certainly, their networks end up getting in some ways kind of reproduced, even if unintentionally. So it could be really fruitful to have someone else take the lead on that in the fall. So yeah, if you're interested in doing that, please reach out and let us know about that as well.
So to Brooke's point about numbers of people, what I could imagine, and I guess maybe a question about distributing things. So like Jennifer, sometimes when I see one of your reminders or I see something Sarah puts on the Facebook page, I've wondered about posting something about it, for example, on LinkedIn. So there are places where the networks could pretty rapidly percolate, and they're, it's sort of unknown how many people might show up. Mm-hmm. So just to think a little bit in advance about what happens when there are 80,
Yeah.
What if there are 100, and to at least have thought a little bit about what the impacts of that might be and how to negotiate it. Does it mean that there's a main conversation and there's more breakout rooms? Anyway, just something to think on, because and I guess embedded in there also is a question about, as we tell people, is it really at a personal level, or if we put it in a broader context where a lot of faces might see it, is that okay? Do you want that? Do we want that?
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me we're raising such good questions between the our intention with the toolkit and the website is for it to reach as many people as possible. We really want these materials to be accessible for educators so that students do engage in this way. So that's our one part. And then the other is, as we do that, do we then open the doors to a much bigger group? And I think if we just keep these two things going along in parallel, we know we want wide dissemination of these materials. And we have thus far done a really, I think, beautiful job of continuing this open question of, how big is the right size? Do we still feel like it's the right size? So to my mind, if we can do those two in concert, that's great. And I'm excited by the idea of multiple languages and more diverse backgrounds of people contributing and being part of the group. So I think that could only enrich us as we are thinking about sizes. And I love how creative this group is. So I'm sure we'll find a way to keep the intimacy that has been so valuable to, well, from my perspective, the honesty that comes forward when we're feeling like we're in communities of trust. And that's what we want to preserve in this.
Yeah, if I may, I would add to that. Ellen just took most of what I was about to say, which is fine. Glad to be in good company. We have developed a community here of like-minded individuals. It's largely grown organically. We're going to face some challenges to continue it in the same arc that we have and I speak here only for the North American context, as life returns to some perverse semblance of normal in the fall. Those of us associated with universities are going to find that there's a different rhythm in our teaching, a different rhythm in our meetings with students and colleagues. And so how to keep this distributed community, which is spread out over multiple continents, working, as so much more of our energy is not going to be directed to face-to-face contact with students and face-to-face contact with colleagues, and hopefully a little bit of detensioning, a little bit of reduction of that anxiety level associated with that. I think that an intimate community is a very productive one. We have barely begun to scratch the innovation and the passion of those who have shown up within this group. I mean, we have a lot more we could talk about. And so there's no need necessarily to bring in an awful lot of new voices, because we haven't quite figured out what everyone here has to say. I'm all in favor of slow growth and caution, because it is too easy to be overwhelmed. And it is too easy to dilute the affective power of the shared dialogue by bringing in lots of new people. I'm not saying don't bring in new people, I'm not saying that at all, but by opening the doors to whomever may show up, you run into the problem of losing the thread that we are just beginning to braid in constructive and beautiful ways. So slow growth is what I'm advising, which I think is what Ellen just said, basically. Slow growth in parallel. I want the other thing. I want the website to blow up. I want the website to go crazyville. But this part, a nice sort of meditative, reflective relationship to that as we begin to continue to grow organically, I think is probably the right model.
Yeah, I want to echo that. Thank you, Terry, for saying this. And piggybacking on what Linda said, there are also security issues when you open these Zoom spaces to any audiences. We've had so much Zoom bombing in our events at the University of Minnesota, then concerns about if the session is recorded, then people who show their faces in the recording, that they need to acknowledge and consent to the recording then being not only being recorded, but then how the recording is stored, who has access to it, all of those things. So we've come across a number of challenges with our online events at the University of Minnesota. So it really has to be balanced. And I very much agree with Terry that if and when meetings have large new audiences, it's very easy to lose momentum, that you have to sort of retrace a few steps and sort of start introducing the topic from scratch. Mm-hmm. So these are really hard decisions.
I agree with what you've just said. And I think going back to the goals of the work that comes next will then reveal what the audience should be. With a community that Mike Gillespie and I have been part of for the past 11 years or so in the Pacific Northwest, called Sustainability and Contemplative Practice. I can't remember, Mike, but I think we met for 4 years before we decided it was time to widen the circle, because we were kind of figuring out what we needed to figure out about what we were doing and why pedagogies of reflection and contemplation were so important to the work of teaching about sustainability and justice.
Right.
So Mike, do you want to add anything more?
Well, I was thinking that I tend to agree with what Terry and Claude were saying, or Terry and Mark. But would it be possible to have guidelines for encouraging other people not to join this group, but to form how to form their own communities of practice as a way to, because what we're really gaining from this group, I think, is working together as faculty, and that seems to be the emphasis of the website too, right? So maybe there is an added side to it that encourages people in a way that maybe guides them in even a little bit in how to do that. But it wouldn't be just the idea of expanding as though just getting bigger is better.
Thanks very much, Michael. That's an interesting idea. And I'd love your thoughts on where you've seen that done well. Because so if you wouldn't mind to share those in some way, that would be wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to just maybe stop us. I realize it's 10 o'clock and well, it's 10 o'clock where I am. I'm not sure what time it is where everyone is. And I did want to thank just one more time Robin for her incredibly hard work and excellent results on this project. Was really a lot of, I hope you can see all the clapping, Robin. One of the things that will not surprise any of you because of the materials that we're dealing with, that Robin really raised for me was what a challenge it is to look through all these materials, you know, from an existential point of view, you know.
My existential crisis over the existential toolkit.
Yes, and I, you know, we're smiling about it, but it was real and true, and points yet again for the necessity of this website and the work that we're doing, and the importance of community and supporting one another in these kinds of activities. So I just think it's really worth noting how fraught the areas that we're working in are, and that we're all at risk. And that's why we need to really be there for each other in this way. And I really feel that in this group. So thank you to Robin. Thank you to all of you for the incredible resources that you shared. And to Jennifer and Sarah, always, you know, as this great tiny community within this great community. So thank you all very much. I'm gonna stop our part there, but Jennifer, I'll turn it back to you. Or Robin, did you want to add anything? I'm sorry.
No, I just want to thank everyone for all your contributions, and it is a real pleasure being part of this community. And I have learned so much. So yeah, I'm just grateful to everyone.
Great. And maybe the last thing that I'll say, as well as echoing those thanks, is perhaps if everybody could I think that Sarah's point was helpful, that we might want to actually have that submission form loaded onto the website before we send this around. So what I'm happy to be the person that basically sends out that announcement. And let's, Robin, if it's okay, if we could plan for that to be done by next week, and then I'll send out that email just as everybody is finishing up their quarters and semesters. I'll let everybody know and then remind you all to please share with your networks as well.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
And then my final thing would be to say, if you have a suggestion or want to volunteer yourself for the schedule for next term, please do so. The sooner we get a lineup going, the sooner we can take off for the summer. Maybe we'll have to do it next fall too, but it'd be good to have some names in place before we take our breaks. Thank you.
Anyone who wants to be on that review board too, who wants to, I think there was Ellen Field mentioned, and then Irene Lambro, but I think Irene is on now, but just maybe get in touch with us, the Existential Toolkit at gmail.com, or in touch with Jennifer or Ellen. That would be awesome.
And I think, Robin, we have two people right off the bat who were Andrea and Irina. And then we had a roster of other people coming, which is wonderful. So we'll just look through our, Jennifer, if you could just save the chat for us, then we can go back through it and we'll pull this up. But so nice to have more than two.
Everybody who said something that they volunteered for something, I have your name on it.
Okay, you're right, Sarah.
I've already done the fishing through in real time.
Okay,
Nice.
Okay.
that's good. Thank you.
Sarah, I just wanted to mention that, and thank you, just like big thank you to everyone, that I said I could volunteer like maybe for a second term, but if there's no one really in, I mean, I think that doing this in the first term and having Robin there would be just such a good learning experience. So I can squeeze that in if needed. And I can also do Spanish curating as well.
Great. All right, everyone, thank you. And hope to see your faces all back on Zoom before too long. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, looks like Brooke just logged off. Sarah, she might actually be intending to talk to us over the phone. So, okay, let me see, let me check my email real quick. Because I know she did send a reminder, and then I can just loop you in on the phone call. And I told her I needed to keep it to like 15 minutes or so because I got a jam. And you're muted, but I think you just said yes. Okay, I'll see you soon.